So there's some speculation going on about people's inner psychotic nature, quote unquote, and violent urges in humans, made manifest by the semi-recent Stanley Cup riots in Canada. Riots and outbreaks of violence are kind of odd in that they can make otherwise ordinary, docile people suddenly become violent, where they're also fine a couple days later, and you wouldn't be able to pick the rioters out of a room or out of a police lineup. So that makes one wonder what's really buried under the human psychosis. So what I'm thinking is maybe Western society and all of our high standards and morals are really sort of a facade, a cover, a ruse. Maybe they just repress psychotic urges and the violent nature of humans, and we pretend that it doesn't exist, and we teach our children that it shouldn't exist, and that they're bad people or bad children if they fall into and cave into these violent urges. And society in Western culture has become very, very repressive. Even when violence is warranted in self-defense, it's still become very stigmatized. A perfect example of this would be, gun ownership bans. And we have this obsession. There's plenty of people that say, ban more guns, ban more guns, ban more guns, violence is bad. And the key point that they try to make is that someone who, say a woman who gets raped, and, if she shoots her attacker and rapist, she's a bad person, and someone who just allows themselves to be raped or possibly killed by the rapist is morally superior, and that our society should pander to this, and that these people should be uplifted for their pacifist nature, and not for their violent solutions to problems. Because self-defense is bad, and because it's violent, and there should be other ways, even though, the actual results from gun bans have been that gun violence always goes up when you ban weapons. Who are the two biggest gun control advocates in history? Can you name those two people? I can name them for you, and their names are probably not a coincidence. They're Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, two very, very, very big gun control advocates. So yeah, the two most famous people in favor of gun control and a disarmed citizenry in history are Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. You can look that up. So, if you don't believe me, Google it. Google Adolf Hitler gun control, Joseph Stalin gun control, so on and so forth. A government wants a disarmed citizenry, because that kind of citizenry is more dependent on the government for protection and for security. But you know something funny? A friend of mine is a police officer, and she works in Vegas nowadays. She used to work where I live. That's how we met, but she's in Vegas now, so she was transferred, and this was a few years ago. But you know what she tells me? She tells me that if you call 911 and say that someone's in your house, and you don't have a weapon to defend yourself, and you're calling and asking them to come and help you, they're not in any rush to get there. They're going to take their sweet time. The police officers aren't going to be in any rush to get to you, because you're going to be dead long before they get there, and the criminal is going to be gone. So the police officers are going to come to you, and they're going to take a picture of your dead body, because, you're gone. You're a goner. Because you didn't have a weapon. And that's how the police respond to this. They think that when you call 911 and tell them someone's in your house and you don't have a gun, that you're a corpse. You're a dead man walking already. And you'll be dead in a few seconds and be dead long before they get to you. So there's no rush, not from seasoned, experienced police officers. Novice ones might rush to your aid, but I was told by this police officer that I really needed to start carrying a weapon, and that I shouldn't depend on the police to do it, because of this. So, why create a disarmed citizenry? Well, the media portrays it as psychotic, violent urges come out, and if we give everybody guns, there will be pandemonium. There will be chaos. Even though every time this has actually happened in history, it didn't result in pandemonium or chaos. It resulted in more security. Think to yourself, why have there never been any mass shootings at an NRA convention? There's hundreds of thousands, sometimes even millions of dollars of merchandise at these conventions. So it's a very, very appealing target for, say, a thief or an armed burglar. But nobody tries to pull out a gun and say, stick your hands up and give me all the merchandise so that I can get away with it. So why don't they? Well, because, you'll have at least a half dozen people pull out their own guns and point them at you if you say that, and you have some hockey mask on or whatever. Whereas in quote-unquote gun-free zones, all the mass shootings occur at gun-free zones because people there are disarmed and helpless. So, think for a moment. What's really the driving force behind this sociological stereotype that the media forces onto people? Because a lot of people believe that if you give all of the eligible adults weapons, all the ones who pass their little background checks, that there will be pandemonium and chaos, even though we have no statistics to support this belief. But everybody seems to think it. Now, of course, it makes sense to not give the mentally ill weapons and to not give weapons to the people who have criminal records and such. But this is because they're not in the eligible adult category. They're in the non-eligible adult category. And everyone seems to think that pandemonium will be the result of arming all of the eligible adults. But there's nothing to prove this. There's nothing to back up this idea. I've looked everywhere. Everywhere you have an armed citizenry, crime rates go down. I've never seen this change, unless you gave guns to the mentally ill or something like that. Whereas vice versa, whenever you disarm the citizenry, crime rates go up. This isn't something that's new, that is just something that's happened in the 1990s and past with England. This isn't something that history is still exploring. This is something that's been going on for hundreds of years. The more armed your citizenry is, the lower crime rates are. It's a common theme. The idea that it will result in pandemonium is ridiculous. It's fallacious. It has no evidence to back it up. That, in combination with the types of people who actually want to push this gun control idea on you, which is a controlling repressive government, the government that tried to pass SOPA and PIPA, the, government that can't be trusted to manage a proper war, the government that you definitely know you cannot trust, are the people who mainly want to pull away your gun rights. And let's even look at these big major gun control advocates in the media. How many of them, the big, rich, and powerful ones that look like they have a qualified opinion, how many of them who don't carry weapons themselves, who are gun control advocates, still walk around with security guards of some sort? And the answer is almost all of them. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, the two biggest gun control advocates in history, are Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. Does this not tell you anything? That something is wrong with the idea of creating gun-free zones and taking away gun rights of eligible adults. If that's not going to give you a hint, the two names Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, I don't know what to say to you. So, yeah, that's really all I had to say on the topic of gun control and the topic of chaos. Well, the topic of gun control. I'll talk a little bit more about the idea of pandemonium and of chaos. So this is an idea that I had, which I'm going to call the riot experiment. Now, remember what I was talking about the inner psychotic nature that's being repressed for humans, the quote-unquote violent nature, the evil, sadistic nature of defending yourself, of being a bad person. I was wondering what kind of little unethical science experiments we could come up with that would bring this out. And I was thinking, let's clear, if I was in control of the government or a research branch of the government and had a whole lot of money that I could spend on some crazy project just to see what would happen, and I didn't care about being ethical or not. Here's what I came up with. This is what I call the riot experiment. You build a small town of a reasonable size that's got a whole bunch of different houses, a bunch of different buildings, and a bunch of vehicles that are parked all around the place. No one actually lives in this town. It's a placeholder town, like the kind of mini-cities that are used for training soldiers in the military. Same idea. So no one actually lives in this town. There's just a whole bunch of buildings and a bunch of vehicles and such, just sitting in the middle of essentially nowhere. So we gather, 1,000 different upstanding citizens, people that have no criminal records, no criminal background, and we gather them together and we put them in the city. We give them a lot of equipment to start fires, a lot of gasoline, a lot of lighters, and a lot of alcohol. We try and get them as drunk as possible. And we say, here's your task. You can go home once you're finished. Your job is to burn this city down. Destroy the cars, get drunk, level the buildings, everybody have a good time. And the 1,000 people that would be participating in this little experiment would be people who have perceivably never held a gun before, or have no criminal record. And we'll see just how long it takes them to burn down this little town. I'm wondering just how psychotic real, ordinary humans are. I wonder if any of these test subjects would get hurt in the process. I wonder if they'll not get hurt, but succeed in accomplishing their objectives and burn the town down. I wonder how quick they'll be able to do it. I wonder if they're going to have any inhibitions about doing it. So, I think an experiment like that, despite it being very, very unethical to some people, might answer questions about this real, quote-unquote, repressed psychotic nature of human beings. Because we stereotype almost any violent behavior as bad. And I can probably bet you that if nobody was harmed during this experiment, people would still use it as an example of repressed psychotic nature and that people are evil. And this is the same type of logic being used by the same type of people who want to take away your gun ownership rights, and who want to say that self-defense is bad because self-defense is violent, and you're morally superior if you die in the name of our ethics and our morals and our pacifism than if you defend yourself and your family. And I think an experiment like this might contribute well to breaking down this stereotype and showing people what being a human being really is all about. So, leave a comment. Tell me how evil and unethical I am for thinking up an experiment like this. I'll see you next time.